Everyone's pretty jazzed to hear from you. So I will let you do your introduction, kind of share some things that you want to share. And then maybe here at the end, I'm sure these guys are going to have some questions for you as well, but they don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from you. I'm passing the baton your way and let you take the show over.
Cool, thank you. I'll apologize for this flashing light you might see on the screen. I don't know what it is. It happens on my Zoom for some reason, but yeah. And so hi, everybody. I'll just do a quick introduction. My name's Chaz Powell. Aaron might have I can't remember your last name. Aaron might have said a bit about me, but basically I'm an expedition leader, a survival instructor, and I teach sort of survival in forest environments, mountain environments, sort of any sort of outdoor based environment really. And I'm also classed as an explorer. I don't necessarily like giving myself that name, but over the years I've sort of taken it on, and this year I was awarded with the Explorer of the Year title by the Scientific Exploration Society. So it's obviously quite an honor to be classed as an explorer and someone who takes on adventures and is looked on as being that sort of way, really. And some of the journeys I've done, I've got a project called The Wildest Journey, and it's about walking the length of Africa's wildest rivers whilst trying to raise awareness for wildlife conservation and taking on really big adventures at the same time. Some of the walks I've done, I walked the length of the Zambezi River, which was a 2,000-mile trek in 2016 and 17. That took me just under 5 months to complete, walking on my own for most of that journey through very difficult environments. Obviously a very tough expedition in general. Some of the other journeys I've done, I walked the length of the Gambia River in West Africa. That was another journey. It was just under 2 months to complete that one. It was 1,200 kilometers long. And as well as that, in 2019, and as well as that year, I did an expedition to walk across Madagascar, the country of Madagascar, whilst following Madagascar's longest river. I walked from east to west across the country with a small team on that expedition. I've been traveling for about 17 years, so I've got a lot of experience, and it wasn't till I got till the last so many years I started doing more remote expeditions and more extreme things. I started my sort of travels with a lot of backpacking around the world. I backpacked around the world for about 8 years, and the more I've traveled, the more extreme my expeditions have become, and the more I've stretched my comfort zone and done obviously really difficult expeditions. One of the things you guys asked was about what does it take to be an explorer? I think, well, the sort of difference between the two is between just traveling and being an explorer is, I think when you're an explorer, you're actually going on an expedition or some kind of adventure to do some kind of purpose and maybe discover something while you're out there. It could be an archaeological survey of some area. It could be you're sort of researching, like for myself, for example, I'm always researching wildlife conservation and the deforestation that's happened in some of the places I've been, and the loss of wildlife, the loss of habitat, the encroachment by humans into wildlife territories. And I think when you sort of go out there and you discover these things, and you're classed as an explorer because of you're coming back with some kind of information. And when you're traveling, I guess you've got no real, like for years I'd travel, I didn't really have any kind of purpose. I just wanted to travel, and I feel like something within me since I was young, like you guys, I've always just wanted to travel and explore and sort of take on adventures. And I think over the recent years, I've obviously been classed as an explorer because I've been coming back with information and discovering certain aspects of that, really. And I guess that's the sort of difference between the two. But I think if you want to be an explorer and you want to explore, I think you just need to have a passion for it. You need to be really passionate about going out there and discovering these things. And wanting to take on these wild adventures, but also determination. I think a lot of the times you'll run into difficult situations, like I'll talk a little bit more about some of them situations afterwards, but some of the situations you come into, it's not always easy on an expedition, and you've got to have determination, and you've got to have that mental power to get through them situations. But it's also, I think, general things that you wouldn't even think of, like having a sense of humor, and just sort of taking things with a pinch of salt, and being quite laid back on an expedition, because sometimes you'll go through difficult situations, and the more laid back, the more you can laugh about certain difficult things sometimes. That I think that really helps to get you through the difficult situations. But yeah, as far as survival, for me, I guess it's obvious, as far as like having your oxygen, your sort of shelter, your food, your water, your sort of main components to be able to survive. It's always important to obviously have them things, and if you're going on an expedition, you've got to really prepare and know that you can get water. A lot of my journeys have been following rivers, and I'd always drink water from the river, but obviously survival wise, you need to be able to purify that water, filter that water, make sure it's safe to drink. But first of all, you need to know you've got water. It's very important in order to be able to survive. Food is next on the priority list. I guess it's not as important as water, but obviously we need food for energy. We need food to build our bodies and our strength, and knowing that you can either get food on that journey, or you can get, there's shops, or there's places you can forage, there's villages, there's areas you can get water, but obviously as well, making sure you're carrying a lot of supplies with you if you're going out on an expedition that might last for several weeks, or the duration. You need to know that you've got plan B, you've got plan C. You can get your food in your bag, but then you've got enough to survive. But then you might have a village here which might have food, there might be a town nearby, you might be able to get transport out to this area, etc. You need to know that you can survive in them areas. And I think a lot of the times it's always the things you don't think about that put you in a survival situation, like the weather, the heat, the cold, the sort of extreme temperatures, and the extreme environment. There's a lot of unexpected that happen on expeditions, and most of the time when I've been in a real survival situation, it's been because of an unexpected moment. Maybe there's a wild animal that's just come out, I've come face to face with, or there's been a real difficult hostile area I've been passing through, that I've had to use my initiative to get out in difficult situations. Or sometimes it's a case of you run out of water, and you've got to find the nearest water source, or find obviously somewhere to get food. There's definitely been times where I've run out of water, run out of food, and I've had to sort of really think about how I'm going to get them things. And so survival is pretty much knowing you've got the things you need to survive, keeping your wits about you, and obviously just not worrying too much, really. What sort of tools, strategies, and advice for the real world? So I guess you guys are studying a lot about the real world and survival in the real world, and I think that you can put any aspect behind an expedition, obviously, to the real world, and say that you still need these things to survive. It's obviously a lot easier in the real world to survive. We've got houses, we've got taps with water, we've got shops with food, and it's obviously a lot easier. But I think one of the things I always think of in the real world that's important, and it sort of comes from a quote from Charles Darwin. And a little fact for you, by the way, I was born in the same place as Charles Darwin, if anyone's heard of him. But the fact I was going to say about Charles Darwin is he says that it's not the strongest species or the most intelligent species that will survive. It's the species that's most adaptable to change. And I think that if you, the wind started getting crazy here now, but if you sort of find yourself in a situation where you're things are changing around you. Like the last year and a half, there's a lot of changes that have happened, and I think that the more we can adapt and the more we can sort of move on and sort of change the way we think, the easier it's going to be to survive. That's the sort of main thing I always take on board with things. And being able to sort of change and adapt and really be flexible with the way things are in the world. And the same on an expedition, you're going to have so many things thrown at you, and knowing that you can adapt and change and maybe take a different route, maybe take a different sort of way of doing the expedition. You should never really punish yourself. And the way I always look at things as well is, as long as you're moving forward in a positive way, then that is the most important thing. I think if you're in a situation where change is happening and you're really struggling with that, I think you just need to really step back and know that you need to move forward in a positive way. And that's throughout my life, I've always took that on board. As far as any difficult situation I've had, I've just known that I need to move forward and just progress. And that is really important throughout your lives to do that. And some of the stories I want to share about my expeditions and some of the survival. I picked 3 stories that sort of stand out to me really, as far as having survived or learnt lessons from. And I think these are quite powerful moments where I some of these moments I nearly died. Some of these moments I was obviously in a very difficult situation. Some of these moments I just wasn't thinking myself. I was thinking in a different mindset. And I think sometimes you have to really learn from these lessons. And I have learned from these lessons. And these stories I'll tell you, hopefully you'll get an idea of what I mean. But the first story is about when I nearly died in the Zambezi Gorges. And I've been walking for a month. Actually, I've been walking for 2 months at this point. I'd walked nearly 1,000 miles, and it was nearly the halfway point of my Zambezi expedition. And the halfway point, you get to the Victoria Falls, which is the largest waterfall in the world. And after the Victoria Falls, the river drops down into a huge gorge, which is about up to a mile deep, but it's a bit like the Grand Canyon. It's a huge gorge carved through the land, and it goes for about 150 miles, but it's very steep, very difficult terrain. And the time of year when I was walking, it was the hottest time of year. Temperatures were up to 50 degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit. That's about 120 or something crazy, but it was very, very hot. And the only place there was any water was down in the river in this gorge. So I had to make a decision about walking down in the gorge or walking on top of the land. Because there was no water on the top of the land, I obviously decided to walk down in the gorge, but that meant I was walking a lot slower than I had been. Beforehand, I'd been walking maybe 20 miles a day. Down in this gorge, I was walking about 2 miles a day, and I was going over boulders and it was really steep cliffs, and it was just such a difficult time. But basically, I underestimated how much food I would need while I was down there and how long it was going to take me to walk down there. And it got to the stage, I've been walking down there for 2 weeks. I hadn't seen a single person. I'd probably covered about 20 miles in them 2 weeks, which I'd normally do in a day otherwise. And the food I had was starting to run out. And I was obviously starting to panic a little bit and starting to worry about how I'm going to get out of this area. I had about another 100 and something miles of this gorge to walk. And I knew that if I carried on in this way, that I wouldn't be able to do it. So I made a decision after 2 weeks of walking down there. I got very frustrated, very impatient with myself. And I decided I was going to try and climb out of this gorge. And on the map I had, it showed another river that would potentially go down into the Zambezi, but it was sort of, it was a bit far away. It was maybe 20 kilometers away from where I was. So 4 o'clock in the morning, I started climbing out of this gorge. The temperature was 40 odd degrees Celsius at that time, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And by the time I climbed out, it was nearly 50 degrees Celsius. And it had taken me 3 hours to climb out of that gorge. It was that steep and that difficult. But when I got out, I thought on top of the land was going to be quite smooth to walk on, but it was just overgrown thorns and other little hills that went down into the gorge. And basically I couldn't walk very easily on the top of the land, and temperatures were now very, very hot, and I'd started to run out of water. I started to underestimate how difficult it was going to be on the top of the land, how much water I was going to need. And I soon got really, really sick. I soon got really ill. And my first thought was, I need to get back down to the river. I'm going to run out of water. I'm going to overheat. I'm potentially going to get heat stroke. And I went back. I was in a different place at this point as well. I'd been walking for several hours, and I'd ended up in a different area. I wasn't in the same place I climbed out. So when I went back to try and get down the river, I was faced with a huge cliff face, and I soon realized I wasn't going to be able to get down that cliff. And at the same time, I realized I was getting very ill, and I was starting to panic. So the first thing I did, which if you're ever in a survival situation and it's too hot or too cold, you need to either get shelter or get warmth. So because it was getting too hot, I had to get shade, and the only shade I could find was patchy thorn bushes that were not good really, but it was patchy shade. So I got in some shade, and at that point I was panicking because I realized I can't get back down to the river. I can't get anywhere on top of the land. I've got no water. I'm getting very weak. I'm losing all my energy, and at this point I had the only sort of safety device I had on me was a satellite phone, and I had an SOS button on the phone, and I had to activate this SOS, which means a message is sent to a center in America somewhere. It was basically like I can't even think of the word, but a place where they're messaging you, and a control center where they're helping you and looking for any rescue teams in the area. And because of where I was, there was no rescue teams. There was nothing around me to be able to help me. So obviously at this point, I'm having a conversation with this person in the control center, and they're saying they can't help me. They can't get any help. There's no one in the area. And I'm saying, look, I'm going to be dead if I don't get any help. I'm in a real difficult situation. At this point as well, I'd started to drink my own urine, which is always a really obviously nice thing to have to say, but I had no other choice. I was getting so thirsty. I was getting so overheating, but I had to drink my own urine at this point. And it's never really a good idea to actually have to do that if you're dehydrated in the first place. But because I was panicking, because I had no other way of getting anything, I had to do that. And so basically I was doing that, but then I was also conversating with this control center, and they said to me, the last thing they said to me actually was, we can get you a helicopter, but it's coming all the way from South Africa, which was maybe 1,000 miles away, and it's going to take about 5 hours to get to you. They've got to send it out. And I said, look, within 5 hours I'm going to be dead. And I was very confident that I wouldn't be alive in that time. And I basically decided I was going to go back to the cliff where I initially thought to myself, it's too dangerous, I can't get down. And I said to myself that I'm either going to die climbing down this cliff or jumping down, or I'm going to die overheating and sort of sat waiting for a helicopter that might not even come. So I went back to the cliff. I was looking at it a little bit differently. I could see that it was this steep cliff. There wasn't many places. There wasn't anywhere really I could climb down, but I could see like roots of trees hanging out. I could see little rocks coming out of it. And basically a bit like a free jumper, I decided to jump and grab onto these rocks. And this sort of rock that was sticking out the side of the cliff, I jumped, I grabbed it. I was sort of scraping down the side of this cliff, and I sort of fell. I fell about 15 feet, and I landed on my leg. And I remember just lying there thinking I'd broken my leg, but luckily I hadn't broken my leg. And I sort of got myself back up. I was on this little ledge at this point, and I'd already cut my nose on a rock. All my hands were bleeding from scraping down the side. And I basically did this for about an hour. I was like free jumping down. I fainted at one point, and basically I just had to, like I said before, I had to keep moving forward. You know, I was in a difficult situation. I had to move forward. And you have to have real determination to get yourself out of a situation like that. And I had to just keep moving until I got down. And as soon as I got down, I could see the water in front of me, the river. I just fell into the river. I drank maybe about 5 liters of water in about 10 minutes. I just couldn't get enough water. And I had to stay in the water to cool my body temperature down for about an hour until I could actually get back on my satellite phone and say, look, I'm back by the river. I'm okay. And I've survived, And at that point, I decided, these are the sort of lessons I learned from that. At that point, I decided I wasn't going to continue my walk. I thought to myself, I'd nearly died at that point. People back home are probably going to be worried. It's very selfish of me to take on this expedition. And, I didn't want to continue, but I had to walk back on myself for 3 days to get out of that area. After that, to get back to a road. And when I got back to the road, there was a search team there. And luckily, people picked me up from that point. But in them 3 days of walking back, I started to think to myself, I put myself on an expedition to try and walk the wildest river in Africa. What am I expecting? What am I expecting to happen? At least one of these difficult situations is going to happen. And I sort of moved on from that situation. I decided I was going to carry on. Obviously, I was thinking very differently about survival, thinking very differently about I need water, I need food, I need to know that I can get through these areas. I need to basically survive in any situation that's thrown at me. And I put myself in a situation then that I got too confident, I got too cocky about how I was taking on this expedition. And I realized that once I nearly died, I realized that I'd bitten off more than I could chew. I thought to myself, I can do this. And I had to start thinking a bit smarter. I had to think about water, food, survival, other people as well. I had to think about people back home. Am I putting myself in a situation that could possibly kill me? And is it fair on people back home to do that? No, it's not, So I learned a lot of lessons from that. And I think that if you come that close to a situation, you're going to learn a lot about yourself, and you're going to learn a lot about how you are as a person, and what you can get through as well. That you can get through difficult times, and determination, and the will to live. The will to live in that situation was so powerful that it helped me survive. And learned a lot about that. Really did. Another story on the same expedition, the Zambezi. There was a time. One of the things in Africa is when you go through villages, when you go through certain areas, you have to there's a bit of a tradition where you have to go and see the chief. You have to see the head of the village, the mayor, depending who it is. And they give you permission to either stay in the village, pass through the village, or sort of accept you to be in the area, sort of thing. So it was a case of, I got to it. I walked through Zambia, and Zambia was quite peaceful, quite a nice, welcoming place. And there's 6 different countries on the Zambezi I had to walk through, and Zambia was the main one. But the expedition finishes in Mozambique, and Mozambique was in a civil war at the time. And I'd been warned about going into Mozambique. And people told me that if you go into Mozambique, there's a good chance you might be kidnapped, you might get shot, you might get killed. And obviously I was very, very frightened of this, very worried about that might happen. And basically I'd gone into Mozambique, and I could sense that it was a very different vibe. It was a very different atmosphere, and I was being welcomed in a very different way. There was a lot of hostility. There was a lot of suspicion. There was a lot of real confusion to why I was there, and why is this person walking through the village? What is his purpose? Is he a spy? Is he here for dodgy reasons? What is his purpose of being here? And before that, in Zambia, I'd had a lot of welcoming. They'd been happy to have a person in the village, and I think it's always about respect. You have to understand the situation. You have to respect the people. That's why you have to go through this process to ask. You have to respect the fact that it's a different culture. It's a different way of life. These people are going through difficult times. And when I hit Mozambique, obviously this was very apparent that they're going through difficult times. And I entered a village, and one of the guys called me into the village, and they were speaking Portuguese, so I couldn't fully understand. I could speak a little bit of Portuguese. They could speak a little bit of English. It was a bit of a broken conversation, and this guy called me into the village and said, come in, see the headman, see the chief. So I came into the village. This was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was starting to get a little bit dark. It was late in the day, and I basically sat down in the village, and the headman came. He couldn't speak any English, so this other guy was there translating and telling me what he was saying, and he was asking a lot of questions about why you're here, what is your purpose, what I was saying that I'm walking the Zambezi, I'm trying to get through the area, obviously trying to do as much as I can to make these people feel like they can welcome me, and I'm not a threat to the village. But you know, this process happened, and it went on for hours. I think it got to like 11 o'clock at night. I was still sat there. There was, by the time this had carried on, the crowd had grown. There was about 300 people around me. Half the crowd were getting very hostile, getting very angry and upset the fact I was there. The other half were sort of getting protective and trying to sort of fight my corner and sort of say, oh, he's okay, leave him. But so this went on for hours, and in the end, they said to me, well, they didn't believe my story. They thought I was a spy. They thought I was a threat to the village. And the next thing I know, I'm being grabbed by a load of people. I'm being dragged along the floor. I'm being kicked. I'm being hit. I don't know what's going on. There's like a flurry of things happening around me. And the next thing I know, I'm in this mud hut in the middle of the village. There's no windows. It's just dark. And basically, I was in this mud hut in a village for 3 days. I had no food, no water. And they'd held me hostage in this room. And at this point, obviously, I'm very upset, very confused, very tired, very, really lost energy at this point. And I was sat in this. Luckily, I still had my bag and my things, and I put my tent up in the room, and I had a few bits of food, like dry pasta, and I was trying to get what I could out of my bag, but basically, I didn't have very much, and I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And after the 3 days, there was the first person that sort of translating and helping me. He came up to the door on the third morning, and I begged him to say, can I please use the toilet? I just need to go to the toilet. I'm obviously, I need to get out of this room, blah, blah, blah. And basically, I had my bag on my back, and I had a plan in my mind that as soon as I was let out, I was going to walk towards, I knew where I was going to go. I had my compass, I had an aim of where I was going to go. And basically, when they let me out, this guy let me out. It was about 5 a.m. There wasn't many people around. I basically walked as if I was going to the toilet, but then I carried on quite fast through the bush, through the overgrown bush. And then I just had to keep going. I could hear a bit of commotion in the village, people shouting, oh, a lot of confusion about what's this guy doing. But I just carried on. I had to carry on moving for about 3 hours. I got back down to the river, then I had to lay low, and probably for a few days I was laying low and sort of hiding and moving along the river to get away from this area. But these once again, that situation was very, very difficult. Lessons I learned was, I'm trying to do something very difficult. I'm putting people in a very difficult situation. I'm looking at myself and thinking, at this point, why am I doing this? What is my purpose behind it? These people are obviously very suspicious. They're going through a difficult time. And the thing I took from that was I didn't think they meant me any harm. I just think that they didn't know what to do with me. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of unsureties about why I was there and what I was doing. And initially I was quite annoyed, but then I understood that I had to respect these people and understand them, and I had to be thankful that I'd gotten out of that situation. I could have once again been killed in that situation. And at that point, I got so confident with being in the wild that I stayed near the river for the rest of that expedition, and I stayed away from villages, and tried to sort of not have any human contact in that area, because I knew that I was potentially seen as a threat to the villagers, and I knew that I had to survive, and it was a bit opposite to the other situation in the gorge, where I was in a wild place, but I needed to be in more civilian based places where I could get food and water, to then having to avoid people to survive in the wild. So it was a very difficult, very different situation. But yeah, that was the second story, I guess, about survival. The third sort of story is more about respecting cultures, respecting people, understanding and looking at yourself. If you're in a survival situation, any difficult situation, you really need to look at yourself and think, what are the pros, what are the cons, how can I get out of this sort of situation? And the other story was when I was backpacking around the world. They just started letting people into Burma. I was in Thailand at the time, and they just started letting people into Burma, and I was like, I want to go into Burma. I want to be one of the first people into Burma. I was only a young guy at the time, and I thought to myself, I want to go into the country, and no one's been allowed in there for years and years and years. And I said to myself, I'm going to get a visa. I'm going to enter Burma. So it took me a couple of weeks to get a visa, and I entered Burma. I got into Burma. I was the only sort of non-Burmese person there. I was on the local buses. Everyone thought I was crazy for being there. It was just a bit. I got mugged in the town. I got money taken off me. I was once, and this was towards the end of a very long spate of travel. I'd been traveling for about a year in different wild places. I'd traveled the length of Africa. I'd traveled around Southeast Asia, and I was living out of a bag. I was living off very little money. I was just a young guy traveling, and no real purpose, just to explore and have an adventure, really. But basically, I was in a difficult situation. I'd been mugged. I had hardly any money left on me, and I was quite demoralized. I was very not in a good place in my own mind. I was quite young and quite naive and quite vulnerable, to these things, that I'm putting myself in a place where they've only just started letting people in. I'm there coming in, expecting things to be all happy and whatnot. And I didn't really understand cultures at that point as well. I didn't really respect many cultures. I was a bit of a wild one. And there was an incident where I didn't have any money. All I had was a bus ticket to get to Bagan. And Bagan is like a huge place full of temples and an old historical place. And all I had to my possession was about $50 and a bus ticket. And basically, I got on this bus, and it was a 12-hour bus journey, and it was a really old bus, really rickety, really cramped, really, really not a good journey. And the worst thing about the journey initially was I got on the bus, and next to me was a monk, and this monk, dressed in all these orange robes, he basically had his legs crossed, and his knee was on me. So basically this journey, I was obviously very tired. I hadn't eaten. I was hungry. And now I had a monk who was leaning on me, and he was basically, I was very uncomfortable, and I was very sort of impatient and not very respectful, to be honest. I was very unrespectful towards this person. But basically, this journey, it had gone on for hours, and I think, I was getting more frustrated, more sort of annoyed. The fact this monk was sat on me, the fact that I hadn't eaten, the fact that I hadn't, I'd been robbed, I hadn't got any money, all these things were piling up. And, I was in my mind, I wasn't in a good place. I thought, I'm in a real low place at the moment. I'm not feeling mentally good. I'm feeling really annoyed with people, and I think that's not a good place to be. And basically the lesson that happened on this one was, we reached the halfway point of this bus journey, and I was off the bus. I had my head in my hands, sat down on the curb, and it was like a break, like a rest point. And I was just like stressed. I was just like, this monk's doing my head in. He sat on me. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm annoyed. And the next thing I know, I look up. I'm sat down on this curb. I look up, and the monk is there in front of me, And all he does, he doesn't speak, he doesn't say anything, he just passes me a bag. And in this bag is drinks, food, you know, all these wonderful things. And basically the lesson I learned after that, I was like, you know, I didn't care. I let him sit on me. I was happy. You know, I sort of thought to myself, humanity, you know, as far as this person doesn't know me. He can obviously read I'm not in a good place. He bought me these things. And the fact that I was hostile towards this person I don't even know, you know, and I didn't respect his culture. I didn't understand him. I was in a different place. But I think that lesson I had, you know, it doesn't sound like it's like the most incredible story, but the lesson I got from that was life-changing. You know, I thought to myself, you know, I don't understand these people, and now I do, and now I can sort of like respect them, and I can sort of, I need to step back and have a look at myself sometimes and think to myself, am I making my situation worse with my behavior? Am I not respecting different cultures, different people, different ways of life? And I think it was, you know, there's not just survival as far as being able to live, there's survival as far as having, you know, the right mindset, you know, whether that's a positive mindset, being grateful, being respectful, you know, to people and understanding people. You know, you've got to really understand a situation. From all them situations I had to understand, you know, I had to understand that I could have survived, I could have killed, I could have died. These people are going through difficult times. Myself, I'm going through difficult times, you know, and you need to step back. You need to be grateful. You need to really think about the positives, you know. And if you put yourself in a situation, you need to be able to adapt, and you need to be able to change, and you need to be able to move forward. And I think for me, you know, the biggest lesson, like I said before, is being able to move forward, stay positive, adapt to change, you know, and be respectful and learn from things. And I hope you guys have learned something from that. And you know, that them stories, they, you know, they stand out to me, and I hope they have to you. Thank you. If you've obviously got any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Wow. Well, Chaz, first, incredibly powerful. I mean, I know it's hard to see. These kids got pages and pages of notes, and so lots of powerful stuff, and a lot of things you were talking about is really connecting to the work we're trying to do. You know, because as we said, obviously we know we got to have food and water, but there's also another part of just surviving successfully is all the things you talked about. How do we respect one another? How do we work with others? How do we kind of work for our own mental willpowers? And so just awesome stuff. So well, we've got about 5 minutes, and then they have to transition to their next class. But do you have time for 5 minutes for some questions?
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you guys want to, if you got anything you want to ask.
Anybody? We got one in the back. We'll start Mrs. Campbell.
Yeah, because we're going to be studying all 13 and soccer players that were in that cave. Do you have any insight or first-person perspective that you would share from your travels in that area or in Thailand or anything like that that would give us more clarity about what their rescue workers went through?
Yeah, I mean, that situation was really scary, wasn't it? I think them people obviously must have been out of their wits, and I think for them personally, they need to obviously. The mindset is 100% there. You know, you're in such a difficult situation that you're so stressed, and I can't think of anything worse than being trapped in a cave, to be honest. But I think just staying positive, having the right mindset. You know, I think, and the people that rescued them obviously outstanding. The people who did that, you know, and just to get them out was incredible. But I think for me, what stands out with that is complete mindset. You know, and just. Especially if you're in a group as well, you've got to keep everyone else positive. And it sounds a bit harsh, but like I say, like a sense of humor in the most difficult times is so powerful. You know, it's obviously, there's nothing really you can laugh about in that situation. But for me, if I'm in a difficult situation, I find that the most powerful tool, just being able to sort of, you know, make people laugh, make people happy, positive, you know, positive mindset the whole time. And in that situation, you've obviously got to rely on humanity, like I did. You know, at times where these people are going to rescue you, you've got to stay strong. You've got to keep everyone sane. You know, I think you're going to lose your mind to the highest level in that situation, and keeping people positive is 100%. If anyone is in a situation where they're in that much desperate need, it's important to keep each other positive. I think is the main thing I can really think of for that, to be honest. But
Thank you.
Right, you want to stand up and say,
My question for you is, do you ever see like another explorer do something do like an exploration and you tell yourself, I want to do that?
yeah, I think, to be honest, most of the things I've done, I've taken ideas from other people, you know, especially like old historical expeditions, like when David Livingstone and all these other explorers visited areas which were quite little known to the Western world, really. And I think there's a guy called Leveson Wood who walked the length of the Nile from England, and he inspired me to actually go out and walk the Zambezi. So I'm always very passionate and interested in anyone else's journeys, and I like to learn from other people. You know, I look at their journeys. I'll get advice from other people as well. I don't, you know, I've obviously got a lot of experience myself, but I obviously like to seek other people's opinions, and I'm always inspired by anyone who takes on adventure, to be honest.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I was wondering how you became like an explorer, and how did you learn to survive like living on a backpack?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it was when I was young. I sort of did a thing called Duke of Edinburgh Awards, where I was learning how to go out and navigate and equipment and be in the wild environments. I trained as a mountain guide, so that taught me how to survive in mountains and forests and different environments. But I think it's also been a very natural process, to be honest. Since I was young, very passionate, always just got out there and learnt my lessons from being in difficult situations. I trained as a bushcraft instructor, survival instructor as well in the UK. But I think it's just over time I've naturally learned things, and I think having a passion to learn as well. You know, I'm interested in plants, I'm interested in trees, in mountains, and just learning about different environments, and then learning about yourself. I think you can match the two together, and yeah, becoming an explorer. You know, I think that's something I've never really said I'm going to be an explorer, but I think it has naturally evolved into that now. And I've done so many adventures that I've now been seen as being an explorer, and it's obviously a very honorable thing to be classed as, to be honest.
Then we've got time for one more, and then we'll let you get on with the rest of the day here. So
You said you have encountered animals in your adventures. What kind of animals have you encountered or come face to face with?
Yeah, I've seen quite a lot, to be honest. I've seen in Africa. I've come face to face with lions. Obviously, quite a scary experience. In Senegal, we had to walk through the largest lion park in West Africa, and we had rangers with us. But every now and again, we'd walk in single file. The rangers would stop us, and we'd see a lion in the distance walking. And luckily, I never come too close to lions, but I knew they were outside my tent. I could see prints and things, and I could hear them in the night. But the most difficult one was elephants, to be honest. And I love elephants, you know, they're incredible creatures. But there was one point where I was charged by a big bull elephant in the bush. And luckily, I managed to get out of its way and get onto this sort of higher verge. And the elephant didn't charge after that. It sort of, they do like a mock charge, then a real charge. You know, so a mock charge is to let you know that they don't like you're in their way, they want you out the way, and a real charge is when they're gonna get you. But luckily, that was a mock charge. And there's been a few times I've seen elephants, seen rhino, I've seen hippos, I've seen crocodiles, lots of crocodiles, and yeah, lots of wildlife, lots of snakes, really dangerous snakes, black mambas, deadly snakes, you know, and very close encounters. But yeah, I love wildlife though. It's one of the main reasons I go out there, and luckily they haven't attacked me.
awesome. Well, Chaz, we can't thank you enough for your time. This has been incredibly powerful for us as our journey, and just get another perspective and hear from someone that's doing some incredible work, not just exploring, but also just building awareness for wildlife and all the work that you do. So we can't thank you enough for carving out some time, and I'm glad you're feeling better as well. So thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you all, guys. Thank you.